for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As a way of respecting, honoring, and creating awareness about our past, we begin our village board meetings by acknowledging that New Paltz is on the ancestral land of the Munsee, Esopus, and Lenape people.
I just need a second here to pull this agenda. Sorry. Ariana, can you tell me whether these things have been added to the agenda or not? Otherwise, I just want to do it. So on the joint agenda, I wanted to add a resolution asking for SUNY impact aid for the water fund from the New York State budget. Is that on? You can add that.
It is not. We'll add it right now.
Okay. And then at the end of the village agenda, we need to make sure that the letter to the DEP is included if it's not already.
It is.
That is.
Yeah, as is a resolution from Alberta regarding election inspectors.
Because that's one that was added.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm just using my phone looking at this agenda instead of a laptop. So those are the only things that we have added to this agenda, correct?
Correct.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the agendas.
Second.
Favor? Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to go ahead. Does someone want to take this announcement regarding the county annual application period for agriculture districts? I think you did that last time, Ariana. You want to just...
I did. I can do it again. It's really just letting people know that if they need to or are in the category where you would apply, it's open till March 30th. So the county requested that we help them promote that and let people know.
Great. And someone want to walk us through a fire station project update?
Sure. The work to remediate the mushy wet area at the fire station on the two corners on west and north began work in earnest this week. So it was good to see trucks up there and earth moving machinery working it. A lot of gravel was delivered, and we're behind a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks behind schedule, but with the weather warming and this solution that's been reached that we approved a budget of about $40,000, I think, COPS to be spent. It's now moving along. Ari, do you have anything to add?
No, you did a great job. Thanks, Bill.
For the next, are we on to the next announcement? Sorry. For the soil building event, it's on March 27th. And let me pull up the info that I have. It's on Saturday, March 27th at 12 noon. It's a project of the Village Environmental Policy Board, and we're teaming up with Future Fruits in Kingston. And it's a soil building session, and it's for the, the Village Hall ecoscaping project. So again, March 27th, bring your own shovel if you have one. Of course, wear your, mask, double mask, and anyone who, wants to help out this project, whether, coming to the soil building event or, just in any other way, you can RSVP for this. and also get involved by emailing npbcity@villageofnewpaltz.org. I put that all up on social media, and I'll continue to spread that around too. And yeah, it's going to be pretty awesome. We're going to put some compost and mulch down. It's pretty easy work. We're going to get our hands dirty.
Alex, can you just say a word or two about what soil building is?
Basically, it's like prepping for the actual, planting of like the ecoscaping project. So, you got to build up the soil. So we have all this cardboard, got, some other materials. So, and that's actually a whole part of the point of this event is for everyone to kind of like learn more about what that is. And that part of the process, like, yeah, but basically like creating like a really healthy soil landscape in that currently very barren area outside of Village Hall. So if you don't have any idea what any of this means, then you should totally come because we can learn. That's why we have experts coming to help us and walk us through it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, you're muted.
So we have the short-term rental law public hearing. So this is a modified version of the law that we considered and had public hearings for recently. So I wanted to basically start over again after editing the law a little bit. So I'd like to just motion that we open this public hearing, but then anticipate keeping it open. I don't believe that we received any new feedback. So I'm going to go ahead and motion that we open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then we received a few letters about the proposal to change the section of Huguenot Street to one way. Did other members of the board read these? I mean, I can summarize. I feel like we've gotten a lot of valuable feedback from different folks in the community, bike ped, as well as neighbors. Individuals have called my office. I've chatted with lots of different folks who've considered this proposal. I would say that the response that we've received via this public hearing process has been largely mixed, and I'm willing to continue to keep the public hearing open. But to be completely honest, I'm feeling a little agnostic as to whether to go ahead and move forward with this change to Huguenot Street based on the feedback that we've received. That's largely felt mixed. I don't know if the village board wanted to add anything else or summarize some of the letters that we received during the past week.
Well, I think, as I said a few weeks ago or previously, I think there's a compelling argument to just wait and see because there's going to be changes in that part of town. And also there's clearly not, there's not a majority, let alone consensus on this issue over there. Folks have very different points of view. So I think we should just stick a pin in it for now. I mean, we can leave it open if you want, but I foresee us saying, let's just stick a pin in this idea for now.
And I think it's worth mentioning that the varying points of view come from people who live on the streets, not just people outside the streets.
Yeah, the feedback has been very thoughtful. So I do think as that area sort of is evolving because of the construction going on over that way, it's worthy to maybe, just wait or just see how the conversation continues to evolve.
So I'm comfortable continuing to leave it open. Maybe we should anticipate keeping it open for one more meeting, but I think, the short discussion that we just had, just taking a rough temperature of the board, it seems like because of the mixed response, we don't have a large number of people who are saying this is an absolutely fantastic idea. Sometimes when when you get a mixed response, that's actually fairly helpful, and it's indicating that what we should do is probably to sit on our hands and do nothing. So that's my take on the conversations that we've had so far. So then let's go ahead and move on to the
You need a second on that?
2 public hearings that remain open. Do we have any public comment generally?
Were you closing that public hearing?
No, both public hearings remain open.
Okay.
So item number 1, we're going to have a conversation about the police reform update. Jen, are you going to walk us through that?
I am, yes. So our draft report is out. So that's our big news. The report is out. The recommendations are there. There are a few things still outstanding that we know we need to go back and put into those, regardless of public comment. So for instance, if you have had a chance to glance at the report, there's completed dates and who should be looking to make sure that items are completed. Those are all left blank, and we know that. So that's work that we know we need to go back and do. We'll be meeting on the 15th for thoughts, feelings, impressions, items that we maybe have missed entirely, or people feel we have not addressed adequately, or anything else that people want to tell us at that point. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. I know you got our letter about payment for Kate, for our editor as well. So I'll just go ahead and state that.
First off, so many, 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 many thanks to you and your team for this amazing work, this unpaid labor that you stepped up to do for our community. And I haven't been able to look at it, in closely yet, but just looking quickly, it looks like an amazing piece of work. And I just want to remind everybody that this is just the beginning, right? Like, this is a road supposed to provide a path forward. So like what Jen was saying about, like, right now, come at us with what's missing, what needs to be, or come at them, I should say. I don't want to take ownership. They did all the work. But let's hear now. But like, this is not the end. This is the beginning. This is the map, and now we actually have to do the hard work of implementing the recommendations and figuring out how to move forward. So please send back abundant thanks to your crew, and hopefully many of us can attend next. It's the 15th is
Monday.
In the week is that?
Monday.
There you go.
Are there other questions for me?
This is Julie. I just want to add my thanks as well. I want to echo Katie's thoughts. I only had a moment to look at it myself, and it was wonderful what I got to read. So I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of it. Thank you for all your hard work and the committee.
Thank you for the opportunity to serve.
Really appreciate it.
I mean, I have a question. Just like, how can we help you guys, at this point? Should we help spread the word? Like, obviously, but anything else we could do to help?
Yes, definitely spread the word. I think it would be very helpful if we as a committee could know that the town and village boards had really had a chance to review it before we go into that town hall. because in some ways, these two bodies are the most directly impacted, because we've put a fair amount of work before you. So maybe before you thank us too much, you might want to read it more carefully, because there's a lot of work to be done in there, and that would be helpful going into that town hall for sure. Beyond that, I'm sure there are things, but the most important would just be to be there if you possibly can, and be there with questions and an understanding of it. Also, I don't know how many of the other reports any of you have read. Ours is distinctly different in many ways, beginning with sheer size. So this is a meatier document than many of these reports have been. That's great, but it also means that there's more work. I believe that we could be a model community for the implementation of these changes, certainly countywide, possibly region-wide, and maybe statewide, because we were significantly more comprehensive than most of the reports that I have laid eyes on. So
Jen,
that's, go ahead.
Sorry, could you explain to us what would be useful, or what you expect from the village board in particular in terms of this work that you're describing?
Sure. So we really envisioned this as being much more far-reaching than changes to police policy. We viewed this as a holistic change in community ideology, because really you cannot change policing in a community if you have not changed the hearts and minds within the community. So it's a much more holistic approach. For instance, we have recommended participation, broad participation, in the intercultural development inventory, which is a baseline assessment of where, as individuals, people in a community or a workspace are on their cultural competency in a continuum. But also that data can then be aggregated. And so our recommendation is that happen for the town and the village board, the police department, ideally also the school board, and as many employees as possible within the school district, because this is where community leadership really rests and resides. And if we can get a sense of the baseline there, I believe that others will follow. And we'll have a really clear handle on where we are, so we have a clear handle on where we need to go next, because we're largely making it up. We're making assumptions about where we are in our intercultural competency, and those are rarely accurate. So that's one very sort of tangible, granular thing that it would be very helpful to have your support, your enthusiastic endorsement and participation in.
So yeah, I'd like to just, I'm still reading the report, but based on what you just said, I want to remind you that the task of this committee was to review policies and procedures of the police and to recommend changes based on evidence. These are great ideas. We don't get to tell the school board what to do.
Certainly.
We don't get to tell the village board what to do. This is our opportunity to reform and reinvent the police. And part of that is to go through and use evidence-based procedures reviewing the policies.
Sure.
And so I'm hoping that you guys delve deep into that and that we can make some changes. This is our opportunity to do it. And I hope we don't miss our opportunity to make those changes.
I hope we don't too, Neil. I will say that, we've put recommendations for a discipline matrix in, right? So there should not be subjectivity in what the results of actions will be. for the police. We did not have a whole lot of New Paltz specific data to work with because data based on race and ethnicity for stops made and interactions with the police is something that was not being kept. So that's clearly one of our very first recommendations is we need data. You can't aggregate data that you don't have. So, I can't give you, there's a lot of numbers I would love to give you. We would have loved to have given you. We don't have them. So we have to start from no numbers, create those numbers, and without any numbers, project ways in which we will use numbers when we have them. So there's a discipline matrix. There's recommendation for a new police commission. There are definitely tangibles that are directly tied to the police department and policing. We talk a lot about training, what kind of training, how much training, what training is effective and what training is ineffective. There's a lot in there that deals directly with policing, but the police department is part of a community.
Great, looking forward to it. Thanks.
Any other questions for Jen?
So Tim, we have a quorum now, so I'd like to make a motion to open the town board portion
Second.
of the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Thanks, guys. Sorry, Tim.
So next, we have our monthly check-in with County Legislator Eve Walter. Is Jim here with Eve? Eve, thanks for always making a point to check in with us. It's greatly appreciated. I feel like you either have perfect attendance or near perfect attendance at these joint meetings.
Well, I'll just say
Great. It's great to have a lot of communication with our county legislator.
good. Alex was just at 3 meetings at the same time somehow. I know because I was at all 3 of them at the same time. But yes, thank you. So I'll just address a few things that might be relevant, and if there's any questions. Unfortunately, without Jim here, I might hit a roadblock with the last one because he's more informed than me. But so do you know about the universal basic income call? That I'm still trying to figure that out. From what I understand, and I'm still understanding it, is that the funding came from some foundation. We all have our guesses, and it's probably the same foundation, but and that supposedly that funding is not necessarily tied to the survey. That that Penn State was asked if they would do this survey, given that they were going to do this universal basic income. I don't know if that's really true. I think there's a lot of issues with the survey that already went out to people, which the county pulled after it put up there, and a lot of people complained about it. So I'm still trying to get information about that. There was just a public meeting about it, which was pretty difficult to pay attention, not pay attention, but be a part of and be quiet. One very wise person said that this is neither universal or basic income, which I thought was really great. But yeah, so I'm still trying to dig into understanding and addressing some of the ethical concerns. Katie and I have talked about it a bit, so she knows where I'm coming from. Mostly also, like, how does this potentially impact people? Will it, apparently it can impact people's SNAP and other types of services. So the county had to put in a person who will work with each person who does get So basically, they've have over 3,000 people already submitting, and they're going to randomly select 100 people to get this, and then work with each one to see if getting it's going to impact their public services that they receive. I'm going to just go through all of the few, and then if you have questions. The whole property transfer tax, which you may or may not have noticed, it was in the newspaper. It got probably more airwaves on the newspaper than actually in legislature. It was put out by Donaldson, Petit, and Parity to add a tax to sellers. That's been tabled pretty quickly. So it didn't go anywhere in the legislature. It only went somewhere in the newspapers. The Tech City has gotten a bunch of applications for potential use, and the discussion of transferring it over to UCEDA is happening. That conversation, the legislative hang up is that UCEDA is under the auspices of the executive, all the appointees. It's basically his committee, and there's concerns that it is not neutral enough to make decisions about these programs. So there's push to get more non-executive hired, because it's not just executive appointees, they're people that he pays. So they're trying to create some neutrality there. And then the last is the conversation about legislative programming. So this is kind of like this set of dollars that are given to programs throughout our county. Some of them go to the arts, some of them go to social services, and it's really pretty haphazard. There's no real rhyme or reason necessarily. Like, each one was probably at one point a past legislator pet project, and then it became like these places got consistently funded. And the conversation was, well, how do we make sure we're really delivering the kinds of support that's needed? I was trying to put a push towards only supporting programs that are really going to respond to groups that are who are typically underserved, and that put the onus on proving, like providing services for people of color or people of poor. But I think it'll be an important conversation to have down the line with you all on what kinds of expectations should we have on a program that is asking the legislature to give them anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000 a year. And that's it. So if you have any questions for me.
Thanks, Eve. Thanks
Yeah,
for following up on all that stuff. And just again, it's just good to have these nice open lines of communication with regularity. It's beautiful.
So you don't think anything's going to happen to that proposal to, regarding the tax that Donaldson proposed on
From what I hear, no Republicans care for it, and at least half of the Democrats don't care for it. So I can't imagine it's going to go anywhere. Whether it shows up again in a year or two, I can't say, but right now I would be shocked if it went anywhere.
Okay.
I mean, he literally said that he's postponing it indefinitely, not to the next meeting, but just postponing it in this,
Got
to
it.
the ethers.
Any other questions for Eve before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay, so we have a drinking water source protection program presentation. Who's leading that?
Hannah is, and I see that she is here. She's going to share her screen with everybody. Hi, Hannah.
Hi. All right, I guess I'll set up now. Give me a second.
Hannah has been an awesome resource throughout this project so far. So we're really excited to have her here with us tonight.
I would agree.
Thanks, everyone. All right, should I get started?
Sure.
Okay, so hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Hannah Friedenberg, and I'm a planner at Hudson Valley Regional Council. And tonight I'll be presenting an overview of the framework of the Drinking Water Source Protection Program, or DWSP2, and the progress that the Village of New Paltz has made in working with it. I'll also be asking you for your input later on, as this project is intended to provide recommendations for town and village consideration. So just some background on the program. In the early 1990s, source water assessments were done across New York State for public sources of drinking water. While this provided an assessment for potential sources of contamination, it didn't focus on protection. And then in 2017, Governor Cuomo signed the Clean Water Infrastructure Act, which allocated $5 million for source water protection. DEC, in partnership with DOH, worked together to create the Drinking Water Source Protection Program and the Framework Working Draft to assist municipalities with proactively protecting their drinking water sources and with the goal of helping municipalities develop and implement their own unique drinking water source protection plan. So this working draft of the framework is being put to the test right now by communities all throughout New York State with the help of regional planning boards like Hudson Valley Regional Council and with the help of DEC and DOH. Funding was made available to the planning boards through DEC's 604B grant. The map on this slide shows 9 regional planning boards who have received the funding. And if you take a look on the lower right-hand portion of the map in light green, you'll see the Hudson Valley, where we're now working with Russell Urban Mead from Jason Companies and Peter Fairweather from Fairweather Consulting to create a DWSP2 plan with the village of New Paltz. The framework is a working draft that includes an easy to follow summary of about 10 pages or so, touching on the key components of a protection plan, followed by a resource kit, which is around 130 pages, with more detailed information to accomplish each component of the plan. The framework is broken down by 4 phases and 8 key components. The draft framework is available on DEC's website for anyone to review. You can find it on their webpage by searching for DWSP2. Now let's take a closer look at each component. Since this program is community-driven, the first task is to form a stakeholder group to ensure that there's community involvement and buy-in. The purpose of the stakeholder group is to bring diverse stakeholders together so everyone involved can understand the benefits and the impacts of the program. It also helps in identifying a variety of opportunities and alternatives and bringing various resources to the effort while identifying common ground. A diverse stakeholder group could include water operators, local engineers, planning board members, land trusts, citizens, and more. And it's important to get representation from as many stakeholder types as possible. These are some of the stakeholder types currently participating in the New Paltz project. We are conducting continuous outreach and are interested in inviting new stakeholders along the way to make sure that everyone has a voice. If you're interested in participating, please feel free to reach out to me after this presentation. Stakeholders meet once per month to discuss our progress, and the expert hydrogeologist and planner prepare presentations and communicate their findings and invite stakeholder input. Stakeholders also nominated 2 people as co-chairs who represent the stakeholders in our smaller planning group meetings, where we discuss tasks and roles so that the goals are accomplished in a timely manner. Once the stakeholder group was formed, the group established their goals and a vision for the program. Establishing a goals and a vision helps align the program's priorities and resources. So New Paltz has drafted its goals and vision. The goals for this project are to protect the quality of New Paltz's current and potential drinking water sources, maximize diversity of drinking water sources, keep high quality water affordable to users by minimizing the capital construction costs required to protect water sources, and by improving the ability of the community to operate the water system. And then also to become a more resilient and sustainable community. Their vision is to make New Paltz a more resilient and sustainable community by providing clarity about the issues and options involved in water source protection, to provide high quality, affordable water to users, minimize the risk of disruption of water sources, and effectively protect water sources with minimal unexpected delays. Next is the drinking water source assessment. Collecting information for a general water system overview helps stakeholders develop a baseline understanding of the system and can then be used to select the appropriate methods to delineate drinking water source protection areas. This is where we get into the technical aspect of the program. The water system overview includes basic information about the system, water quality, and quantity. Including a complete review of existing water quality monitoring data, such as ambient, raw, and finished water, can identify potential contaminants of concern and help prioritize protection efforts. The water quantity summary will serve to provide a general understanding of the system's water supply and demand. This information may be used to determine if the water system would be able to provide enough water to the community based on future growth and land use projections, or, as in the case of New Paltz, expanding drinking water source diversity for the sake of resiliency and cost efficiency. Here is a snapshot of the overview of the Village of New Paltz's water system. I know it's small, but I just wanted to show you what the form looks like, and it includes the population served by the Village of New Paltz water system, the number of service connections, general treatment information, and water quality and quantity data that we retrieved with the help of water operator Chris Yeager and John Lawler from the Department of Public Works. The village gets its water from reservoirs and also purchases from New York City DEP, but this plan is focused on protecting the existing reservoirs as well as the potential future wells that is considering putting online to increase and diversify the source water of the village. The new wells are sited near the reservoirs and in the Moriello region, both of which I'll show you when we review the maps in a moment.
Look at me staring at Mike Moriello's like, yep, I got your water. It's all on my property.
In step 2.2, a drinking water source protection map was created to guide the development of the DEP 2 plan by delineating drinking water source protection areas and land use. Preparing a drinking water source protection map may involve revisiting the map developed in the community's original source water assessment program plan, that report that was set up in the 90s from that program, and then creating a new map with the updated information. So stakeholders reviewed the Village of New Paltz's old SWAP plan and found that it did require some updating. So as I mentioned before, the Village of New Paltz has several reservoirs, and they actually lie within the town here near Mountain Rest Road, if you're familiar. This map shows the 4 reservoirs along with the proposed wells. So those are at the bottom. The watersheds for the reservoirs are delineated here and show that 3 of the reservoirs are in the same watershed on the left, dotted in green. And then reservoir number 4 is in a separate watershed on the right, which is dotted in pink. So that's this side, and that's that watershed, that reservoir. Next, we'll see the 2 separate watersheds again for the reservoirs with an added layer of land use. This map is helpful in considering potential contaminants in the area. As you can see, and as discussed in stakeholder meetings, there may not be much on this map that jumps out as a serious threat, but it's still important to consider less threatening potential contamination, such as the county road running through, as there could be a potential crash or spill. Also discussed was the golf course nearby, and although the drinking water tested showed no indication that the golf course was affecting the drinking water quality, it's something to keep an eye on. And then the other remaining potential contaminant could be a break in a septic system from the few residential properties that you could see here in yellow. But that's unlikely to actually impact the drinking water in any way. This next map shows new wells that are not yet in service, but if the village were to put them online, this would be an appropriate protection plan for consideration. For those who aren't familiar with the new wells, they were drilled right near Moriello Pool Park, not far from the community center. So that's here. Those 2 blue dots are the wells, and the pool is right here. It's right nearby. I know it's small. Okay. And then it's also important to note that half of the charge area for these wells is also within the town. So this map has layers pulled from publicly available information. And I just showed you the 2 wells that are blue on the left. And then surrounding the 2 wells is what's known as the well intake area. So that's this orange semicircle. And that's the most influential and area that could have the most immediate effects on the drinking water. Within this well intake area, you'll see a yellow dot here. That's chemical bulk storage. which is actually just the chlorine for the pool. And then also within this area are two little red dots, which are gas stations that they're in red. Outside of that area, you'll see some arrows indicating the direction of flow. The orange areas are more immediate, and the blue arrows take longer for water to reach the wells. So this is kind of the flow throughout the watershed. And the orange areas, the arrows are more immediate, and you can see that they're closer to that well intake area. Okay, so right before, you'll see this Millbrook Preserve in green, and that's really important here because as the water travels throughout the watershed, the park extends the travel time for any potential contaminants that would reach the well intake area. And in that time, dilution and natural attenuation may occur, and it can also buy some time for remediation if that's necessary. There's also a historical record of DEC remediation sites and spill incidents. They were all cleaned up beforehand, and the sites were investigated and have been deemed not to be a current concern. This map shows land uses for the potential Moriello well region. And as I said before, there's Millbrook Preserve in green. There's some commercial properties and apartments in red, community services in orange, a few vacant lots in gray, and then residential properties in yellow. So the priority in this map is the commercial use and typical land use practices of those within the intake area, right here in orange, and that's the most immediate, like I said before. Other possible contaminants could be road salt, fluid or spills from the main road, or any other spill occurring throughout the watershed. But like I said, the time a contaminant would take to travel is a few years, and that's generally enough time to manage a situation. So while the potential contaminants are not of extreme concern, protection is still a good idea as the landscape is well settled. The next component is creating a potential contaminant source inventory. First, a community needs to identify all the possible potential contaminants in their protection area, as I just spoke about when we looked at the maps. The New Paltz stakeholder group set aside time in monthly meetings to discuss potential contaminants, utilizing local knowledge of the residents to inform or investigate what may not have shown up on the maps. So far, we've identified these as potential contaminants. After reviewing to see if we miss anything, we'll prioritize them to determine which require more active protection and management methods in the next step. We'll now be moving on to the third phase of the framework, protection and implementation strategies. Using the potential contaminant source inventory from step 2, stakeholders will choose which protection or management methods they would recommend you, the town and village, to consider. Protection and management methods can be used on their own or in conjunction to protect against existing and future potential contaminant sources. The framework lists both regulatory and non-regulatory protection methods, including things such as intermunicipal agreements, creating an overlay district, best management practices, and doing outreach and education. These protection methods are not specific to any single potential contaminant source. Within the framework's resource kit, each protection method has its own table, which include things such as what it is, when to use it, examples, and where to find additional information. In addition to the protection methods list, each potential contaminant source listed has its own set of management methods. The management methods are either a step-by-step process or a list of best management practices that a community can utilize. At this stage of the project, the technical assistance providers and the stakeholder group will work together to determine which management and protection methods are most suitable to their needs and goals. While the village of New Paltz isn't facing any major threats to its drinking water, it's important to consider protection methods, especially for the areas that are more heavily developed. Stakeholders will review policies for protection, and since most threats are minimal, they can probably just focus on outreach and education for the most part. As previously mentioned, stakeholder input is vital to this project. If you have comments or want to share your input as a stakeholder, we want to hear your perspective. There will be opportunities to comment in a few moments at the end of this presentation. Once they've identified protection and management methods, stakeholders can move on to developing an implementation timeline. Each identified protection and management method should have a detailed implementation timeline to keep the DWSP2 plan on track. The framework includes a list of items to consider for each priority issue, such as which protection or management method you'll use, the costs involved, potential funding sources, and more. And the framework lists over 20 federal and state funding sources that municipalities can apply for to aid with implementation. The last step is to designate a plan management team. This team is responsible for ensuring the protection plan is completed and the previously identified protection and management methods are implemented. In addition to implementation, the plan management team should keep the community and all parties involved up to date on the status of the DWSP2 plan by sharing the plan and subsequent progress reports. The framework also includes ways to regularly evaluate progress and overall success of the plan and make recommendations for revising it. That completes the overview of the DWSP2 framework working draft. Thank you to everyone who's participating in this project and to the mayor for your support. And thank you all for taking the time to learn about the Drinking Water Source Protection Program. Are there any questions or comments either about the framework or about the Village of New Paltz's progress so far?
This is Tim. I did have a question. I'm thinking, because Russell is on this call, right?
Yeah.
Maybe he can help. So you had a circle that was around the Moriello pool wells that we've drilled and tested, and we're trying to connect to our system. So my question is for Russell in terms of geology and also like topography. Like, does it make a difference that above or to the east of those wells is essentially a hill? Like, should that area of influence be kind of tilted more to the east as opposed to a perfect circle surrounding the wells?
Thanks, Tim. This is Russell Urban. There's just a little bit more nuance maybe to explain regarding this map. There's kind of an oval there around the two wells. That's loosely speaking the radius of influence that was generated and we expect to be maintained when the wells are in regular use. So when Hannah was speaking about that as kind of a primary area of focus, that's an area where if there's a new release, it would travel most directly and immediately toward the wells. And then to the east, where the orange color arrows are kind of pointing directly toward that core radius of influence, is, as you suggest, Tim, a descending hillside where, once again, relatively quickly, just under the normal flow of groundwater migration, any release would travel directly into the radius of influence, which would then be actively drawn into the wells. And so that area with the two orange arrows and a small section with orange arrows just sort of to the north and east also are areas where natural groundwater flow would take a groundwater injury, if you will, and have it flow naturally into the radius of influence pretty quickly. Whereas everywhere with the blue arrows, the topography would, in a sense, guides groundwater today and would guide a contaminated groundwater plume first through the valley of the creek that flows under the preserve before it would reach the well. So yes, the answer to your question is the areas with the orange arrows and that core circle of influence are what we believe probably deserve the highest level of protection.
Thanks, Russell. Anyone else have questions for Hannah or Russell? Or Peter? Peter's here.
Hannah, I've got a question. There seemed to be an ask to form a management group. What are the steps for that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the second part of your question.
What are the steps to forming a management group?
Well, Kristen Martinez from DEC is actually here, and I think she might be able to fill everybody in on the details of that. Kristen?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, for the management group, I believe you're referring to component 4.1. We, in our framework, the way we have it written is we don't really advise you to, or we don't, I wouldn't say, we don't tell you, you know, you should have X, Y, Z members from your community. What we recommend you look at is actually your management methods. You know, if I have the component before this one is your implementation timeline, and one of the pieces to that component is identifying individuals that can help you with implementing that management method or that protection method. So, you know, for instance, just as an example, if one of my management methods, or excuse me, one of my protection methods is land acquisition, I might think that someone to help me with that might be a land trust. And maybe as part of my plan management, you know, not only am I looking at people from my community who I think will continually update this plan, you know, we say that this should be, or we again recommend that this should be updated at a minimum of 5 years, but maybe because I know land acquisition, that might take a couple of years. I might want someone from the land trust to keep an eye on that piece of it. But yeah, we don't necessarily, like I said, really tell you exactly who should be on that plan. We just recommend a 5-year timeline for updating, and then, you know, consider, you know, every plan is going to be different. So consider who might be best from your community to do that plan management over the years.
All right, are there any other questions?
I did have a question. It's Julie. So I wanted to, I saw that Ted Nitze is working on this. Is that right?
Yeah, he's a co-chair.
Right. So then I imagine he's brought up the river keepers work that has shown tributary 13 to be affected by enterococcus. And if that's relevant, I just wondered, you know, if it is at all relevant, because I understand that wells draw from much further down than sort of the stream. So, you know, he knows about it though. So I'm sure he would be, but I was just curious if it's relevant at all.
Well, let me jump in. I hadn't heard that, but these wells have been sampled for just about everything.
Yeah.
And they've certainly been sampled for everything required by the health department for approval. And what is interesting geologically is that the vertical separation between the deep bedrock fractures that support this well and the stream appear to be so separate that when we ran the pumping tests, there was absolutely no change in the volume of flow in the creek. And the quality samples of the well bore no similarity to the creek water. So there seems to be some significant and helpful, to the point that you just raised, vertical separation between the deep fractures that are supporting the wells and at least the immediate vicinity of the creek. So that's a comment that I can offer in response to your thought.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great. And, you know, Ted and I were both at this meeting, sort of a workshop, maybe 2 years ago, that where it was discussed, and Riverkeeper has, you know, data if it's of interest at all, but I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah, and we've tested the wells at the Memorial Pool Park for quality more than once too, in different seasons. Do you remember which seasons we tested them in, Russell?
Yeah, they were tested once in May and once in August. One intentionally under very, very low flow conditions where perhaps the impact of the well would be expected to be most sort of hungrily trying to get all the water it could, and one under a more moderate to flush flow condition. And under both, the quality data were very encouraging. It's also worth pointing out that notwithstanding, it will be a health department requirement that this source, like all sources, are disinfected. So there will be a small treatment facility right there near the wells before that water is fed into the water district.
Yeah, we actually spent this morning on the phone with Russell engineers from Chazen, or I guess it's now called Labella.
Not quite yet. We're still Chazen, but we're a Labella company. Thank you, Tim.
Right. So for with your team of engineers, as well as our water plant operator and John and Blue from the village's Department of Public Works. And, this has been a project that has been in the works for years. Government moves incredibly slowly and every die is dotted. It's pretty mind-blowing. So if there's nothing else on this topic, I'm ready to continue on.
The one thing I would say, if I may, is that the National Groundwater Association has this week dedicated to National Groundwater Appreciation. So it's a perfect week to have this conversation. Thank you. And Hannah, wonderful job.
Thanks, everybody.
So should we go ahead and have our discussion with Mike Moriella's team? Do we have the attorneys here? Rick Golden is here. Are Stephanie and Will here as well?
I don't see Stephanie.
I see Will on here. Stephanie told me that she was going to be coming from another meeting as well, so she might be a few minutes late.
Hello, I just sent her the link.
Well, how do you want to start? Does either Mike want to tell us a bit about the project, maybe as a lead off?
I can, Mayor, if you'd like. If that's...
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Everybody, I'm Mike Moriello. I think I pretty much know everybody here. Also on the meeting is Tom George. He is a development entity, and Jess Sudol, who is his consulting engineer and our consulting engineer for the project. I also think that John Mullen is on, who's a partner in the project, and Ed Cooper, who's works with John all the time in his construction business. John is a local contractor. You probably see his trucks around all the time. He does a ton of work for Central Hudson, and he's based out of Saugerties. The Tom, George, and Jess are both based out of Rochester. So I'll let them explain a little bit more too on the technical side in terms of questions and things of that nature. But back on January 19th, we submitted a combined application, zoning petition, and annexation petition for 60 acres of land presently located in the town to have annexed into the village. And I think Jess has a map and everything that we can show. We'll get to that in a second. But if you're familiar with the property, at the end of Hawk Hill Road, where Hawk Hill meets Cross Creek Road in the Harvest Hill subdivision, is a big lot that's all wooded. That lot would be part of the project. It would not be built on. We would give up all rights to build on it as a buildable lot, and it would be added to the remaining 55 acres, which goes behind Bellaterra Apartments, and then up about probably to the base, a little bit higher than the base of a fairly steep hill. Then up above that, and still in the project, would be a fairly large area of land that would be forever preserved with a no build restriction on it, which is presently farmed now and would continue to be farmed, and preserve the view shed along 32. So I'm sure Jess can walk you through that. But before you is just that, those application documents. There's a couple of maps. There's the assessor's certification, which is here. Petition for rezoning, because the thought was to change the zoning, which is currently R1 in the town, to R3 in the village, which would allow multifamily use. We put together, it's a total of 4-lot subdivision, just because there's farm structures, and my daughter's where my daughter lives, where my other daughter lives, so we kind of carve those out. But altogether, the plan is one that would annex the land into the village. That process, which Rick Golding can certainly describe, is a fairly involved process. That determination can't be made until a determination of significance is made under seeker. So we'll be a while before the actual annexation can take place. But the way that the law reads, you have to start out with that petition for annexation first. So we asked for this joint meeting, and that's pretty much the background of it. I will tell you that and I've told this already to the mayor and to the supervisor, there seems to be a very big need for this type of project. I've been in contact with Dennis Doyle, who was really beating on me for the last several years to do a multifamily project because of the pressures that are felt in New Paltz and even around the county. And I'm happy to say that I think we brought the right people in to do this project. I will emphasize also, there is no pilot associated with it. There's no request for any kind of a reduction in taxes. I'm not ever traveling down that route. We did have a charrette process with the people in Harvest Hills back in October. We invited them over to the farm market and had a little presentation. It went really well. The biggest issue for them was that they did not want a through road through their subdivision. That seemed to be the biggest thing. And they wanted us to make sure that we did put up a fence or some kind of a barrier so people wouldn't be able to just walk from this project into the subdivision. By and large, that meeting went pretty well. And had a lot of good questions, and it was good to see a lot of the people that I've known for a long period of time. But I can turn it over to Tom or to Jess if they'd like.
But actually, Mike, I had a question. So you're talking about fence. So would that connection from your proposed apartment complex to that neighborhood, would emergency vehicles be able to connect?
Presently, we have two entrances up off of 32. Of course, I think we probably still have to hear from Corey and see what he thinks in terms of, emergency and access. I know that, and even if there was an access, I don't think that their concern is, I think, mostly a through road. That's what they really did not want, or that the neighbors did not want. Also, there is a connectivity planned with the project for a hiking and biking trail, which would lead from the project right to the college, directly to the college.
Yeah, I would add that was always something very important to Neil and I when we were all talking about the possibility of you submitting an application, that we wanted to make sure that you had a green light from the college that they thought it would make sense to make connectivity existed. And you know, we have received assurance from President Don Christian that they thought it would make a great deal of sense to have that connection.
Yeah, I'll say that Neil and Tim have both already put in quite a bit of time talking with us on this project. We've done a fair amount. We did a fair amount of reconnaissance, trying to get things right to make the application, you know, robust and merit the kind of attention that it's going to get.
Right, but I think it's important to note that then the town board and the village board have to make a decision about annexation, and then in parallel, the village planning board will make a seeker determination, and then you'll have the site plan review process that our planning board would normally, you know, so all of those checks and balances and that entire process, you know, it is still ahead of you, and you know better than anyone that that's an involved and intense process. You don't show up unless you're, you know, patient and have a lot of emotional strength.
Well, yes, the mayor is correct. This is a, you know, it'll be a long and involved process. It'll start probably, you know, I always say kind of the kickoff with these projects is when you circulate the notice of intent to serve as lead agency to all the involved and interested agencies. We've listed a ton of involved and interested agencies for the project. So that will probably occur. Hopefully it'll occur next week when we go before the planning board. But I agree, it'll be a lengthy and comprehensive review, but we're looking forward to it.
Hey, Mike, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the structures themselves, the homes that you're going to be building.
Sure, I think probably Tom is probably the best person to talk to, because he has all of that information. Tom?
Actually, Mike, this is Jess from Passero. If you don't mind, I can do a quick overview of the site plan and then a little bit about the structures, just to kind of give everybody a general idea of what we're thinking about at this very early stage. All right, so I'll go ahead and do that. Jess Sudol again from Passero Associates, engineers and architects from the project. Just so some of you recognize some of the names on the call. Also with us this evening is Dina Lagonegro, who's our Director of Entitlements here in Rochester, and also Chris Laporta, who is out of our Hudson Valley operation, one of our project managers. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here, if that's okay. We do have some drawings. Again, all this stuff has been submitted and is on file, so we're not presenting any new information, but I think it will help with the conversation. What you see here, does everyone see that aerial photo? Are we good?
Yeah, we see it.
All right, great. Okay, so you can see the parent parcel, if you will, that's currently highlighted is approximately 124 acres. That's going to contain the majority of the proposed development, bound over here on the east side by Route 32, down here on the south by Jansen Road, and then has some connectivity out to the subdivision that Mike was talking about previously. Also included in the application is this 5 acres that Mike was talking about that was part of the subdivision, if you will, but would remain open space and undeveloped as part of the application. So there's about, between the two parcels, just under 130 acres that are under consideration. But of that 130 acres, only 60 acres of it is proposed to be annexed from the town into the village. I think everyone probably recognizes, you know, the municipal boundary here that extends out around the university. With that said, I'm going to give this a little bit of time to load. Here's a zoomed in version of our current concept plan or our site plan. You know, again, we are in the very early stages. This is really our first meeting to kick this process off, and we fully understand the environmental review process and site plan process and all the various stakeholders that will be involved that is ahead of us. But just to give you an idea of where we are today, the magenta or purple boundary, I'm colorblind, so I'm not sure if I got that exactly right. That represents the project area, or the 60 acres that's proposed for annexation as previously described. As you can see, in the top left corner, that's where the boundary extends around that 5.4 acre lot also off of Cross Creek Road. I will say of the 60 acres, we are proposing on disturbing or developing significantly less than half of that. We certainly recognize from the context of the area and the neighborhood meetings and the due diligence that we've done to date, the importance of buffering and screening. I think most people probably can figure out what's proposed with the site plan, but we're showing our road and parking network kind of extending throughout with those two curb cuts off of 32, one down here, which would be our main entrance, and a secondary entrance further to the north with residential buildings on either side of the parking lots. The highlighted area that you see go around the entire development is a proposed public trail system that would be for the use and benefit of not just the residents of the future multifamily project, but also anyone else that would choose to utilize that opportunity. And then we're proposing a connection out to the school. West of our project, you can see that's where we start to incorporate the significant buffering. We will have some kind of stormwater management element. The site slopes pretty significantly from east to west. So, 32 is really the high side of the site, and then it kind of dives down across the development area. So naturally, our stormwater management areas will be here on the west side. And then, there's several hundred feet of buffering to the rear property lines of those homes that are on Hawk Hill Road and off of Cross Creek Road. So we anticipate saving a significant amount of those wooded areas. Over here on the other side of the development, on the east side, we're also proposing a significant setback of several hundred feet from Route 32. The reason for that isn't just to get separation, but as I've mentioned, we are dealing with some topography, which we think is beneficial to the project. Our main traffic circle where you first enter and where our clubhouse is, which has our leasing offices and has mail rooms and has common areas for the future residents, that's going to sit about 25 to 35 feet below Route 32 at that same location. And as I'll show you in a second here, we are proposing relatively small structures. This is what we would call a cottage style project, which we've done in other areas very successfully, including here in Western New York. But they're only 2-story structures, and they're similar to, designed after cottages and single family homes. So the roof lines of these structures, the very top of the structures will be at the same elevation of Route 32. And I'm sure everybody on the call is familiar with this area of 32 and the scenic vistas that exist as you're, if you're traveling north that are off to the left on the west side of the mountains is certainly not anything we would want to impede for residents or people traveling through the area. We want our project, we're proud of it. It's a quality project, but at the same time, we have absolutely no issues with kind of hiding from everybody, if you will. So that was really the design intent. We wanted to, get low enough so that we wouldn't really be visible from Route 32. At the same time, we wanted to make sure that we were providing a significant amount of buffering to our neighbors to the west who were there before we were, and try to really make this project as clustered and as close knit as possible to preserve all of that screening around the perimeter. Just to get to the initial question there, or actually before I do, there are 2 things I want to point out. As Mike mentioned, there are 2 areas that we are carving out of the parent parcel. The first one is approximately 8 acres here on the northeast side, where there's some existing structures. We are providing the required right-of-way frontage so that lot would be a code compliant lot, but that would not be annexed into from the town into the village. And over here, I believe it's around one of Mike's daughter's homes. We would also carve that lot out, so it would not be included in the annexation. As far as these structures themselves, as I've mentioned before, by the way, all the lights just went off in my office, which is why it just got really dark on my screen. But I apologize for that. But these are actual real life pictures of the same type of project with the same type of buildings that we are proposing that have been constructed. The one in the top left is actually the clubhouse, which again is what you would see as you came down our entrance road, which would be dropping in elevation. Again, it's very residential. It's got a lot of gabled roofs, a lot of heavy timber type accents. which we think would fit into the area pretty well. And then we start to develop some of these main streets, if you will, kind of complete streets that could possibly exist within our development area. But again, nothing taller than 2 structures. Up here in the top right, you can see some of our buildings look and feel and act very similar to a single family home, with similar architectural style, with the porches. Our intention is not for this to be some of the student housing projects you see built across the country that are big and 5, 6, 7 stories and super modern architecture. That's just, we don't think that would be a good fit here. And that's not what we're proposing. And again, the best part is we can achieve our goals, and meet a lot of the town and villages goals while only disturbing a relatively small amount of the overall parcel. And that's less than half of the 60 acres, which would be less than a quarter of the total acreage when you go back to consider the original parent parcel. One last thing I did want to mention is, we are proposing the extension of public water and sewer off or down Route 32. It currently exists up near Orchard Street. As part of the environmental review, we fully anticipate a very rigorous review and back and forth on the water and sewer in terms of capacities and conveyance, and ultimately, potential for upgrades at the village wastewater treatment plant, that may be triggered by this development. That's something that's been put on the table by the village stakeholders very early on, and we're certainly aware of it, anticipating that. But all of those things, from water to sewer to character of the neighborhood to potential visual impact and traffic, will all be covered in, I don't want to say excruciating detail, but certainly in extreme detail as part of the environmental review as we kind of move our way through this process, which again, this is the very first step. One thing I would have normally mentioned right at the beginning, which I kind of slipped my mind, I did want to mention, currently we are showing approximately 250 units amongst the various different buildings on the site plan here. So with that said, I don't want to take up everyone's time too much more. I'm sure we'll all be seeing a lot of each other over the course of time, but that's my attempt to provide a high-level overview of the project proposal. I'm going to flip the buildings back up on the screen just because I'm sorry, I forget the gentleman's name, but I know that question kind of precipitated the lengthy discussion that we just got started. So with that, we're of course happy to answer any questions. Tom, I don't know if there was anything you wanted to add from the developer or operator end of things. So I'm going to flip it over to you for any additional comment.
No, I think between Mike and Jess, we covered most of the main high level, things we're trying to just get out there today. So, nothing more than what you see on the plan and what's been presented. So we're ready to.
Hey, Jess, this is Will. Just so I make sure I understand, you had said during the remarks that less than 50% of the 60 acres would be disturbed, but I'm seeing on the EAF and in Mike's letter that 36.8 acres would be disturbed. Is that number correct?
The number is correct. I think I misrepresented that because I didn't take into consideration the stormwater ponds, which are of course disturbance. What I was referring to and what I should have specified a little bit more clearly was the actual development area of rooftops and pavement. So yes, those ponds are physical disturbance, and they are what account for the 36 acres, the additional 6 acres over that 50%. So apologize for that.
No, it's not as significant. I just wanted to make sure everybody was getting the accurate picture. That's all. Thank you.
Hey, Jess, I had a question for you. We've brainstormed a little bit about the idea of this project making a contribution to our municipally owned sewer system. We've batted the idea around a little bit about an expansion tank or an equalization basin at the wastewater treatment property. Because we like many communities, we struggle with inflow and infiltration when we have large rain events and our sewer mains become overwhelmed, and then that creates problems down at our plant. So we were throwing out the idea of like if you're becoming a new customer, and unlike the existing customers, you haven't contributed to the system, could this be your contribution, like helping us with an equalization basin at the plant? I also wanted to throw out the idea of, and we can chew on this more with our own village engineers, but I'm curious if you had any initial thoughts on what if that surge tank or equalization basin was sited at this property as opposed to the plant. So instead of sending stuff when your storm water reaches a certain level, could you hold back sewer and then send it like after the rain event? Do you have any thoughts on that type of solution?
Yeah, no, I absolutely do. I don't want to go all civil engineer on here, so I'll try to keep it as general as possible. But we're anticipating, our project is going to require a pump station because we're downhill from where the main trunk line will ultimately be installed. The downside of the pump station is there's more capital cost up front, and there's some operating costs which will be borne by the applicant and the developer. But the good thing about a pump station is that it's very simple to incorporate EQ into that, and using the wet well of the pump station and also the EQ and the controls on the pump station, we absolutely have a lot of flexibility that allows us to control when we would pump from our project into the public system. So, Seeker is really all about potential, identifying potential impacts and then mitigating to the extent practicable. And in terms of our potential impact on the sewer system, I would think that it would be more than fair for us to incorporate EQ with our pump station to then, pump into the village's system off peak hours. Or, we'd have to look into how we would also do that during storm events when the INI would potentially be high. We would have all brand new sewers, so our INI rate would be much, much lower than some of the village's older sewers. But I guess the simplest answer is yes, I think that's a very reasonable request and a very achievable request on our behalf.
Got it. Yeah, I would assume that you would have probably little, if any, INI. Our challenge is just all of our old conveyance system throughout the lower portions of our system that we've been proactively investing in and replacing. But it's just amazing if we average 800,000 gallons of volume in a day, and then we have a big rain event, we're doing 3 million gallons. And, we clearly have significant INI problems.
Yeah, 4, 5, 6, 7 times daily peak flow through INI. Unfortunately, you're not alone. We see it often, and we understand.
Yep. Any other questions?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Tim. Jess, can you talk a little bit about the structures? Maybe it's a little too early. We're very concerned about energy conservation in this community, what types of building materials you'll be using, what sort of lead guidance you might be following, any impervious surfaces you are planning.
Yeah, so I want to couch this conversation by saying that we haven't finalized what our sustainability plan is, but I will talk about the fact that we do have a sustainability plan that we are working towards, and there's a lot of things that will be incorporated into that. Outside the buildings themselves, we will certainly be exploring the use of pervious pavement. We'll be using a number of different green infrastructure practices. Of course, we'll be using LED lighting and things like that. We'll be employing a number of ground restoration techniques to ensure that all the lawn areas will maximize future infiltration for the groundwater and not leave it all compacted when construction is complete. On the building side, we're considering everything, from solar panels on the rooftops to geothermal to heat pump sources for the MEP systems. I'm not necessarily committing to all of that, but saying that we have a lot of tools in our belt when it comes to different ways to make sure that these homes are sustainable. One thing I will point out is the New York State Building Code has progressed significantly over the years. So our baseline is actually pretty high, but we fully extend on exceeding that. Certainly utilizing and maximizing all of our electric as our primary source of energy. and then different ways to supplement that electric. So I apologize for not being able to tell you, here's every single thing we are doing for sure, because that's part of a lengthy process. But yes, all of those things are on the table. And as we move through this environmental review, when we get into the, talking about potential impacts and mitigation, we'll provide a lot more detail on exactly what that sustainability plan is.
Great. Thank you, Jess.
This is Neil. I was just going to make a comment, kind of build on what Bill was saying. So here in New Paltz, right, we really like our sustainability. We really like our open space. We just passed the community preservation plan in November, overwhelming margin. But at the same time, we're worried about affordability. The village has a, affordable housing law. Oftentimes those things are thought of as being, opposed to one another, that they can't work together. Over the last year with the pandemic, housing prices have skyrocketed in New Paltz. I think, change is hard in New Paltz, and I want people to kind of step back and think about, all of those different aspects when this project gets presented to them. I know I sound like I'm on the side of the developer here, but I think, if you want to preserve open space, people still need to live and work somewhere. And one way to do that is with a density. If you're worried about affordability, the way to, make things more affordable is to increase supply. And so while a project of this size, I think may be kind of scary to people, I think, you also want to step back and realize this is one way to increase the supply, which affects affordability, and also to allow us to preserve open space and still let people live in certain places. And I also think, now's the time to really increase supply when the market is hot, because that means other houses that people move out of other places and move here. They may not be vacant, or if they are vacant, people may be interested in buying them. And it's a good time to do it. And I'm just asking people to, approach projects like this with an open mind. And I know I certainly am trying to do that. And I'm just asking other people to do the same thing. So thanks.
One of the things you said struck a bit of a chord, where we have done these projects successfully. One of the ancillary benefits of it that's not always talked about, in several communities that we've worked in, the community has had issues with there being a higher demand than supply, and that often results in, of course, prices being increased, but you also end up with a situation where you have, landlords who rent out to a whole bunch of students in residential neighborhoods, and that has its own set of potential issues when it's incorporated with home ownership. But, by having this purpose-built housing for specific need, we've had some great success stories with us being able to contribute to, helping that situation for communities. And I'll just leave it at that.
Really appreciative of this presentation and conversation. I'm reminded, I was just telling Tim recently, remembering, I think it was December 2012, very early in the Wilmerite public hearings, my comments about that project were connectivity was really important to me, and green elements, as Bill described, were important. And lastly, please don't ask for a pilot, because this community will not enjoy that. And we've been pretty loud and clear about that. So thanks, Mike. It's also, thank you, Neil, for how you characterize the situation. I'm supportive of this project for a lot of the reasons that you articulated. And I think our community, for the most part, understands that we need to add supply, but it's not just simply adding to that supply, right? What you add matters. And I think, Jess, your name, I think you said that really well, like targeting in a way so that you know that you're meeting a need in the particular community. In this instance, our hosts of a college community is really important. And I just really liked what I heard when you answered the questions about the green elements and the connectivity and the no pilot. And I look forward to seeing this proceed. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Tim. I would add, I think what we're all trying to do is to, set the right tone and be really transparent and have, the elected officials ask tough questions, and then the planning board will ask tough questions, and the applicant will be, super forthcoming with details, and, really look at this as a project where, we're going to have a new neighbor and we want to work together for the long haul. I've been pushing on this idea of making sure that there's a contribution from the project in terms of helping our sewer conveyance system that's challenged. We've also been brainstorming about making sure that recreation fees are paid, and we'll figure out what makes the most sense for this project. But just having all these thoughtful, difficult conversations, and just trying to, be patient and get things right. I feel like a lot of the people on this call have been involved in other projects, and we've paid a lot of tuition and learned a lot of stuff, and hopefully we can apply a lot of what we've learned and end up with a really high quality project that, will benefit our community and the people who end up, living in this complex.
Sure.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, just to echo that, since the beginning of this project and discussions with Mike and his team, Rick and I and you have been involved and asking questions from the beginning, and Mike, Mike has been very forthcoming, and when we needed things tweaked in some of his presentations, he and his team have done it. And Mike being someone who everyone knows and is local, I think we have a potential partner here who's very conscious of the needs of the community, and I think that's shown so far. And I think this presentation goes towards that. I think Jess is correct that the environmental review may actually take some excruciating form at some point, but I think they're going to be receptive and up to the challenge and understanding what New Paltz needs from this project, and so it's to everybody's benefit. So I think so far the process has been productive with the developer at this point. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll just add something. This is Julie. I just wanted to say I do appreciate the clear effort that was made to cluster. Makes a big difference in leaving plenty of undeveloped area. So thank you for that.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we have several hours of board meeting left to go.
Yeah.
Tim, if I could weigh in.
Yes, Rick.
I'd like to just on the process end, try to get some guidance at this meeting. There are two areas that I think we need to address in order to go forward. The town board has already indicated that for seeker purposes that it is not interested in being lead agency. To my knowledge, and we had a meeting with the planning board in the village is willing and eager to go ahead and take on that role of lead agency. And we had a very long and productive meeting in which they clearly understand what's involved in that role and are willing to roll up their sleeves and do what's necessary. So the first thing is in order for us not to start this process, which as most people, if not everyone knows, would start, say, with the planning board circulating a notice of intent to be lead agency. If the village planning board, if the village board of trustees is opposed to that, there's no sense in starting down that road. So although there doesn't have to be a formal vote tonight, if there's sort of this general consensus that the village board of trustees is also willing or receptive to having the planning board being lead agency for seeker, then we can actually start that process on the March 16th meeting at the planning board.
I would be very comfortable memorializing the idea that the village planning board would be seeker lead agents and instead of the village board. The village board and the town board, we have to do our annexation review, and we will need to include a seeker review as part of our annexation. But as you've explained to us, we can't have two seekers. Otherwise that would be, we could be accused of segmentation. It's one seeker, it's one process, one project. So we do seeker once, we do seeker, and have it led by the village planning board, because it feels like that is something that, that they already regularly do. The village board doesn't need to learn how to be a seeker lead agent. I would like to just rely on the planning board's findings regarding seeker and then use their seeker findings during our annexation process, if we could do it that way.
And zone change, yes.
So do we need, as a village board and a town board, to make a motion saying that that's the direction we want to head in?
There's no need, I'll leave it up to Will, but I mean, there's no really need for you to do that at this moment. Because regardless of what you would do tonight, the planning board, if it starts that process on March 16th, is obligated to circulate a notice of intent to all of the involved agencies. That would include the village board of trustees and town board, but also other involved agencies in the state and federal. And so you will get that opportunity after, when you get that notice of lead agency, to then take that formal action of saying, we have no objection. I just didn't want to start down that process if it looked like it was going to be, no, we want to take it. But
right.
If there's no big objection, then I think we'll start with the planning board. Is that all right with you, Will?
Yeah, because the notice of intent from the planning board will go out. Then, as Rick said, there's a 30-day notice requirement before the lead agency takes hold. At that time, anyone who might object has the opportunity to do so, or in the interim, at that point, the village board can say, we've received the notice, we have no objection, and we're going to notify the village planning board of the fact that we support their lead agency declaration. So there's nothing formal that the village board has to do tonight, unless there's a board member who wants to comment or voice any concern about that this evening. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but I agree with the mayor's assessment, because we are going to need to take that seeker, consider it in terms of the annexation and the zone change that's going to be needed once the annexation is done.
Yeah, so you've heard from me. Is there anyone else on the village board who wants to comment on whether they feel comfortable with the village planning board as seeker lead agent?
That all makes sense to me.
Yeah, I would agree, Tim. They've got experience with it. They've worked with Rick for a couple of years now, and it all makes sense for them to lead in this particular step. Yeah.
And the village, as an involved agency, will certainly have opportunities to comment and participate to the extent necessary that the village planning board asks for input. Will be available to do that anyway. So should be fine.
Great.
Rick, do you agree?
Yes, I do. And just staying on seeker, I want to hit one point quickly after that, but staying on seeker, one of the first things that will be done after the planning board would assume lead agency, this project clearly should be, and I've talked with Mike Moriello and he agrees, this is something that is obligated to be a type 1 action, and it's also a foregone conclusion, and Mike agrees that it should not go through an expanded Part 3 process, but in fact should go through the environmental impact statement process. Having said that, one of the first things that will be done in the seeker review will be to determine the scope of the draft environmental impact statement, which is very important. The seeker regulations were modified back in 2019 to now require that any involved agency, and I say it tonight for the purpose of both the Village Board of Trustees and the Town Board, that if they want something in particular studied in the environmental impact statement, they notify during that scoping process, they notify the lead agency here, the planning board likely, and it will be included. And the reason that that's important, especially in this type of action that is multi-headed, is that the annexation, there may be issues of annexation that you want to make sure gets studied from an environmental point of view that may otherwise get missed if we don't have your perspective as to what you want to get studied other than what would generally be studied, including water and sewer issues and things like that. So there'll be not only general opportunity, but a very specific and important threshold opportunity to weigh in at the scoping timeframe. The other thing that I want to bring up is with respect to the annexation. Now, in the briefest of nutshells, the annexation process is that both boards have to have a joint public hearing, in which they hear from the public, and then they have to have separate votes on whether or not to approve the annexation. And if both approve, then the annexation is done. Mike, there's no inhabitants of this area, is that correct?
That's correct. It's all vacant land.
Okay, so it doesn't have to go to a vote of the people within the, who own property within that district, so you can avoid that. So if both town and village agree, then the annexation is going to go forward. And if both the town and the village oppose the annexation, it cannot go forward. And the courts only get involved if one of the municipalities wants to do it and the other one doesn't want to do it. Now, the joint public hearing could be held now, or it could be held after seeker. My suggestion, and obviously I'll be, I can help guide the town board because I have that role here, and Will would be guiding the Village Board of Trustees. But to me, it makes sense for that public hearing to occur after seeker because there'd be a lot more information available, including the impacts and the proposed mitigations, so that I think that a most informed public would be after the seeker is completed rather than prior to seeker. So but I would just like to know generally if that's the path that we're taking, so that I understand that for the seeker purposes, that we'll wait to have the annexation part of it until after seeker has been concluded.
Yeah, I like that idea.
I have a question.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Alex.
Sorry. So the Environmental Policy Board last night, mentioned like being somehow listed as like an involved agency. I just don't know when they would be involved in this process or when that question makes sense to ask, but just asking it.
Yeah, I can answer it now. They will not be an involved agency. They will be an interested agency. Okay. An involved agency is one that's defined by state law and the DEC regulations, and it's a board that has approval power over the project. The environmental board does not issue an approval up or down on this, doesn't issue any permits for this. It's a recommending board, but it will be an interested agency. You will have the opportunity to weigh in during the scoping session, to respond to the draft environmental impact statement, and your comments will have to be responded to in the final environmental impact statement. Involved agencies, not interested, involved agencies, which will include the Village Board of Trustees and the Town Board. After seeker is concluded, the lead agency will be preparing finding statement, which was referenced by Will earlier. Each of the involved agencies also have to adopt their own finding statement that address their own needs, or they can adopt the same finding statement that the planning board does. But I don't want to get too much down into the weeds on that now.
Right. And to answer your question, Alex, we would definitely want, once we get into the process and the secret documents are advanced, definitely going to want written comments from the Environmental Policy Board, for sure.
Absolutely.
One thing just to add to Rick's comments about the timing of the public hearing, Mike, this will be just for your acknowledgement that you're listening to this, because normally, according to statute, the public hearing is scheduled within a certain time after the receipt of the petition. We understand and we assume that you will agree to the timetable established by both municipalities for this whole project, including the annexation public hearing, right?
Not a problem at all. As a matter of fact, I recall you and Rick asked that we waive the statutory time frame for that taking place. We've sent a letter to that effect. Not a problem at all.
Right. I just wanted to get that out so everybody hears that. And I am aware that you already waived it, but in terms of getting the public hearing going, I agree with Rick's assessment that waiting until seeker is complete is going to make an easier public hearing process. It'll also make an easier public hearing process for the zone change aspect of this as well.
Yeah, we'll follow the guidance. We think that's very good guidance too, by both attorneys. And one question that I do have, the regulations for seeker require that an EIS process be posted on a website, so it's available at all times. All the documentation, everything is available. Does the boards want us to try and set that up, or do you guys have a process for setting it up, or how do you want us to do that?
Before you weigh in, I'll just give you my experience.
Go ahead.
And that is some municipalities have more limited storage capacity, et cetera, on their own personal websites. So what happens many times for these large projects in which these environmental impact statements may run several thousand pages with the appendices, is that, and this is considered appropriate, is that each of the municipalities, the village and the town, would have a link on their website, and that link would take them to a dedicated portion of usually the applicant's engineer's website that would then tie in and actually hold all of the documents. So,
you know what, I'm kind of part, so, and maybe Ariana can help us. Ari, if would it be possible if we were able to host this information? Do we have the bandwidth?
I think that we do.
Yeah, I'll tell you why I like the idea of us hosting this is because in 5 or 10 years from now, after this thing is approved, some planning board in the future is going to want to look back on these documents. And if it lives with us, I do it all the time. I regularly look back at old finding statements, old documents like this, and I find it to be incredibly helpful. So if we could be the host, that would be my preference.
Well, the town should also be a host, a co-host on their website and or a link. So it'll be up to the town board to also determine.
Sure, just as long as it's in municipal control for the long haul, I think makes a ton of sense for this project and for the future.
I think it'll be pretty straightforward and easy for us to be able to do that. And if you guys want the village to be the main keeper and the town can link to us, that's totally up to you guys, however you want to do it. But we can definitely handle it.
All right. Well, that makes sense then.
Great.
All right. So the process as it's actually going to occur now, just to sort of give everybody a vision as to what's happening. On March 16th, this matter will be placed upon the Village of New Paltz Planning Board's agenda, in which there will be a presentation by Mike and his crew. The board will recognize that they have received, as has the village board and town board already, the full environmental assessment form part 1. The village planning board will type the action as a type 1 and will vote to indicate their intent to be lead agency, and they will circulate that notice of intent to be lead agency. After the 30 days, as Will had indicated afterwards, and assuming nobody's objecting to that lead agency, they will assume the lead agency position. They will ask the applicant to go ahead and submit a draft scope for the environmental impact statement. And once we receive that, we'll be requesting all the involved and interested agencies for their comments on the draft scope. It's a short time frame. You're supposed to be finalizing the draft scope within 60 days, but I know that Mike will go ahead and agree to a reasonable extension of that 60 days in order to give a reasonable period of time for the involved agencies to weigh in on the scope.
And interested.
No problem.
So that's all I have.
Yeah, I think that covers it for now.
Sounds good to us.
Well, thank you to everybody for taking the time. We're excited about the project, and we're looking forward to working with both the town and the village and the public and the interested and involved agencies. Thanks again.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye now.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Okay, so our next agenda item is the pollinator garden at the town community center with murals and signage. Amanda was going to chat with us.
Right, and actually you'll see quite a number of other names here. We're going to have a couple of other people also speak about parts of this. This project has kind of, we came before the town board with the idea of the compost bins at the community center and initially some plantings to kind of beautify that. And we've now kind of, our group has grown and there's a really enthusiastic number of people volunteering to work on this and take those plantings into a much more, a much more established kind of a pollinator garden. There will also be some artwork that we want to talk to you about. And then we want to talk to you about communications, about how we do with our fundraising. So right off the bat, I see Liz Elkins here and she's going to want to share her screen to show you an idea of the beginnings of this this project, what it would look like.
Everyone. Okay, let's see if I can do this. All right, can you see?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. So we met together with lots of different groups and everyone's pretty enthusiastic about the project. And as we discussed all the different options, we kind of came together and I put together this little plan that the whole group has reviewed. A couple of little changes are going to be coming forward that will add a stepping stone path and a little sitting area so that people can come and hang out there, which will be really nice. The plants were selected for pollinator food sources as a primary reason, and also to support the bird population as well. We have some shrubs in there that they like and some berries. We also did a focus of having a staggered bloom so that there's in general 1 or 2 or 3 or sometimes even more, like in the peak of summer, things in flower so that there's, a good food source for pollinators throughout the entire season. Also work to vary colors and staggered heights to keep it interesting. We have also a big plant list with lots of information that's way too small to read right now, but we can send that out to share it with you once we've amended it with our path in our sitting area. I'm going to pass the torch over here to MJ so that she can tell us a little bit more about some of the groups that are participating.
Hi, I'm Mary Jane Nussbaum, and I'm an art teacher at New Paltz Middle School, and I'm the co-advisor for Climate Club, which is a club started by the kids. In the fall, they approached me and a couple of the science teachers, Laura Bryant and Brian Krebs, and Liz is also a community member and parent advisor for the group. We have 17 students. They're very motivated, and we're focused on themes of energy, water, earth, related to climate change. And they're really interested in focusing on things on the local level that can have a global effect. So they're particularly interested in helping pollinators because they're so important. And we're excited to be working with the Wallkill Valley Land Trust, Pollinator Pathways, SUNY New Paltz, the Hudson Valley Bee Habitat, and a few other New Paltz community groups and master gardeners. We've all come together around this project in the last month, it seems. It's been really quick, and there's a lot of energy around this. And so students from Climate Club will be helping. We'll help with the planting, the building of the compost bins, caretaking, and making educational signs for the garden with information on names and benefits, names of the plants and pollinators, benefits of each, and other facts about them, because they're suffering and in need of our support. Today they came up with a name. They want to call it the Pollinator Paradise. And so the students will be making signs for the garden, and this will count for credit toward Bee City USA certification. And if you're not familiar with Bee City USA, they are an organization that provides a framework for communities to create and enhance pollinator habitat on public and private lands by increasing the abundance of native plants, providing nest sites, and reducing the use of pesticides. So we're excited at the possibility of even pursuing that in the future. So are there any questions or
So maybe just to give everyone, this is the island in the parking lot. And if you see, if what you're looking at, the to the right-hand side would be the community center building. And that little tiny square that's in the middle there, that's the EV charging station. So just to kind of get you oriented, there's some existing raised beds up at the top. Those are those 3 rectangles. And the 3 squares just past that, those are going to be the brand new compost bins. And then down kind of towards the middle, that rectangle is, yes, that's the kiosk that we want to talk about next. And somebody has a picture of that kiosk, right?
I know Liz has one. I have one if you don't have it handy.
I do not have it handy, but
Okay.
I could pull it up while you're talking and probably have it up there in a minute.
So, so actually, who we want to have talk next is Nicola. Are you there, Nicola?
Yes, here.
Okay, right. Nicola's a New Paltz High School student, and Nicola's going to, now we're getting from the planting part into the art part, is going to be doing some painting on that kiosk. So maybe you would like to tell us a little bit about what your work you've done already and what you might be thinking about here.
So far I've done one mural at New Paltz Middle School in the auditorium, another at Majestic Park in Gardner, and then I've done another on Church Street near Isabella's Treasures and Huckleberry.
Do you have any pictures you want to share with us?
I do. I have pictures. I just need the other person to stop sharing the screen so I can present it. Thank you. So hang on. All right. So this is the one I did at Isabella's Treasures. Hang on, these are not organized at all. I'm so sorry. This is what I did in Gardner, and this is like not only me, but other high school students and Lady Pink. This is a lot of fun. We did this over the summer. And then this is one of the designs that I was able to color. This was kind of a bit last minute. And then this is another one. I have yet to color it, but this is just like a couple ideas playing the composition. And we were talking about thinking of doing something this is not very a very completed work, but we were thinking of either doing like a little box around the kiosks.
So that's why we need to see a picture of the kiosk if somebody has it to show it to us.
Liz, you have it?
Yeah, this is Joanna.
I haven't found it just yet.
Okay, Joanna, can you put yours up? So we need to explain to you what the kiosk is there for. I think y'all kind of have an idea of it, but it has some electrical-y stuff on it that we need to be able to make sure that's accessible for the
It has some meters, Amanda, meters.
on the back is, and on the front, I think are some outlets that the DMV van might use. So we want to make sure that those stay accessible, but we'd also like to make sure we have the most most surface to paint on. So we were thinking we might be able to build sort of a little cabinet around that had doors that could open when someone needs to access that stuff. So it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be prevented from being accessed, but then Nicola could use it as a painting surface as well. So that's something we'd like for y'all to think about. I'm sorry, we don't seem to have a picture of it, do we?
Well, I have it.
Okay.
Nicola, if you stop sharing, I can share.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'll let you.
Okay, great, yeah.
Am I sharing the right thing or am I sharing?
Well, we're not seeing the whole, no, we're not seeing the whole thing.
Is that it?
Yes, that's it.
Okay.
Okay, so that's it. So you can see that if you wanted to paint on it, there would be some surface to paint on, and then there's some structures there. So we were wondering if we could just, if it would be possible, and we talked already to DPW about this, and they said you have to talk to the town board, is if we could build a little frame around that with like cabinet doors that could open. So whenever someone needs to get to that stuff, they could open the cabinet doors, but otherwise it would be closed and be a surface that could have painting on it. So that's just something
Did you talk
for,
to the DPW or the highway department?
I talked to Chris Marks.
I think we'll also have to talk to the DMV.
The DMV, because they're the ones that use it? Okay. Cool, absolutely. By the way, Chris Marks, the DPW is very supportive of this, that they felt they could work with whatever we put on that island, that they would mark it off so that they wouldn't run the plow over it and they wouldn't pile snow up on it unless they just absolutely had no place else to put snow. So they didn't feel that having structures and plants and things on that island would cause them any problem. And I think, Joanna, you've spoken to Chuck at the community center also, right? And he's in favor of doing these things, so. Okay, so that's the planting and the art. And then the next part is Alex is working on how our fundraising is gonna happen and how we might ask for some support for that.
Hi, so I'm Alex. I live in the town of New Paltz. I'm a retired earth science and astronomy teacher. I'm just going to go over what our expenses are and then explain how we plan to raise the money for those expenses. Right now, we have a total of $2,900 that we hope to raise. $2,200 of it, and these are very conservative figures, is for the garden and for mulch and maybe topsoil. And then 300 is for the art supplies for the mural and the signs that the climate club could make. And then the other part was for the compost bins themselves, is another 500. So I can probably get up on my screen the expenses for the garden, but I have no idea how to share a screen. So it might be a waste of time. The way we're going to plan to raise this money, and we figured we would round it up to 3,000, is we're going to launch a GoFundMe site page. And I've talked to Mike Beck Sr. about working with the community foundation. So like I could put it on the launch site that I will raise the money for the nonprofit group. The community foundation is like an umbrella foundation that we could use their nonprofit status to create this site. So, we'll set an amount, we'll give it a name. We have a name, I guess now. I didn't hear of it until tonight. And then we'll figure out why, make a description, why we need the money, what kind of difference it will make, and put it up on social media, and hopefully it won't be difficult to raise the money. Are there any questions?
So one of the things we're hoping is that the town and village would allow us to post it also on their websites and on their e-alerts. It's so difficult these days to get messages out to the community as a whole, and certainly we would probably pursue a press release, Terrence, with your media there. But so these are things we're just proposing, and we're looking for feedback and hoping that we get your blessing to go forth with the planting, with the art, and with the communications. And we are actually calling this phase 1. It looks like a pretty big project to take on, and we've got a lot of excited volunteers, but we dream big. And we actually already thinking of phase 2, which would be some more planting along that grassy strip that runs along the road, the driveway that comes in from 32 along the edge of the parking lot. What a pollinator garden that could be. And then for the village, you guys aren't left out, but we understand that you are going to be building a new shed there. And we would love to put art murals on your shed. So we'll be coming back to you with those ideas once this one's completed, but just want you to know where this group's thinking. So am I here? I mean, we'd love to know if you have any concerns, any questions other than the DMV, which was a good one. Thanks, Neil. Anything else we need to do before you're ready to tell us we can proceed?
Quick question. This sounds like a really, really great plan, and thanks for getting together to organize this. It looks like a beautiful thing for our community. This is probably a question for Liz to perhaps answer, but what are these all native plants? And then maybe for Amanda, the question would be, maintenance is always a huge issue, and getting people to volunteer to maintain gardens is it's not an easy thing to do. There has to be a committed group who wants to carry on the maintenance chores that are required. These don't seem to me, at least on the surface, to be very high maintenance plants and plantings. But what plans do you have for that?
Liz, take it away, girl.
Okay, so yes, they are all native plants. They are all northeastern natives. And the idea is that once they're up and established, that it's actually a pretty low maintenance garden, in the sense that a lot of things that you would have to do when you're tending a more formal garden, like deadheading and trimming and things like that, we wouldn't be doing any of that. We would be actually encouraging seed heads to be up there for birds and for perching and for habitat for pollinators. So the seed heads would remain up. So it would need a really solid spring cleanup and an occasional review. This is, of course, down the line. It's not the first year, but it's once it's established. Need a quick review, make sure everything's healthy and there's no, large problems. And everything should be pretty much supporting itself. We brought in grasses to act as supports for a lot of these flowering plants. So it's pretty set up to fill in and be more of a native natural space, less than a formally maintained space that you might see, and that might have higher maintenance needs. And so for the first year, I'm assuming that our group is going to be taking care of watering. We've been discussing hoses and where to connect to, and getting on a rotation for keeping things watered. And while we're there and watering, we'll also check over and make sure everything's okay and weed anything in between.
Right. And we're also, this group is also committed to, don't forget the compost bins need maintenance too and need work. And so we're going to be setting up just like that, a rotation where we'll be taking care of that and making sure that we're, maintaining the brown to green ratio and watering when they're dry and, that sort of thing. So there's going to be, I haven't counted the number of people we have, but it's a pretty good sized group. So I think the expectation is that we're not asking for maintenance from the town, the village, the DPW, or anybody. We will be taking care of that. And I think Liz also said that these plants are chosen to be deer resistant as much as possible.
So are you looking for just the town to approve this? This is because it's on town property?
Well, right now we are, because it's on town property, but we will be coming back to you for your shed. We understand that's going to be your shed at some point.
What
That's
shed?
not on this island, but off to the side. There's a shed there now that's an old shed that we understand is going to be taken down, but it's going to have something of your equipment in it. So the village is going to be putting up a new shed that's associated with the pump shed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little water treatment plant facility. Yeah, we spent the morning with engineers discussing that. That sounds great. You can make that beautified, and I'm super excited. It looks like you have an all-star team, Amanda and Liz, and the other folks. I love the idea of you guys doing projects like this.
And you've just seen the tip of it. We have folks from SUNY New Paltz. We have Master Gardener working with us. We have some because they're invasive. Thank you, Terrence. Okay. Liz said they're all native, but they could be invasive. I see what you're saying. I think if they will stay in our island, we're happy with it. If they start to spread all over the neighborhood, we might think about that, huh, Liz?
Were you asking if there was an invasive plant?
Terrence's comment that just came up on chat was that deer-resistant plants could be invasive.
That which plants are invasive?
Deer-resistant.
Oh, I would consider those like separate categories that might have a crossover, but a plant that's deer-resistant isn't necessarily invasive, just perhaps it's one of the few things that the deer will leave alone, so we see more of it. But of course, a deer-resistant plant could be invasive.
Well, I guess we all think of mint, like the deer don't eat it, but it wants to go everywhere, right? So that's it.
Right.
So do you need the town board to take action tonight?
No, actually, this is only if they will approve us doing the planting on that island. And I think, Liz, so one thing we were cautioned about is that the electrical lines under there are not super deep, and that we should be working with nothing more than a rototiller and hand shoveling. But Liz, were you thinking that DPW could scrape the top off without getting so deep that it would be a problem?
We're going to have those lines marked out. We just have to know where they are anyway.
Yeah, always call before you dig.
Yeah, for sure.
That's
yes, for
important.
sure.
Okay.
So no matter what, we'll have them marked out and we'll avoid them no matter what.
Right.
I know the guys who do that work.
The marking or the digging? The marking?
No, the guys who tell you where there may be lines.
Right. Okay, so that's okay. So DMV and the marking of the lines. Anything else?
I just wanted to make a point when we were talking about manpower, woman power to maintain everything, is that the last meeting we had, there was 15 people on our site, and that doesn't include, that's probably half of our group. So we don't anticipate having people volunteer for that to be a problem.
Do you have water there at the community center?
Yes.
So you can run hoses? Okay.
Yeah, we'll have to run hoses, but there's a spigot by the building, the community center building.
So you can do irrigation, any water retention, reclamation from the community center?
Oh, you mean like the
Rain barrels.
parking lot kind of running towards it? I think
No, rain barrels off the roof.
The roof?
Yeah.
That's a thought.
Oh yeah,
That's
well,
a
there's no
bigger-
reason we couldn't.
What's
Yeah,
that?
that's a thought.
There's no reason we couldn't, as long as we had either gravity or a little pump, we could use that as a water source for sure.
That's, oh, another thing to put on the list for the fundraiser, some rain barrels. All right. Yeah, that's a great idea. What else? I'm writing this down.
I just want to add that this is an intergenerational committee. We have middle schoolers, we have high school students, we have college students, and we have adults and old people like me. And so it's really a wonderful project. And the compost bins will be modeled on the ones at the Reformed Church, where our master gardener is housed. So, and I also wanted to tell you also that there will be signage identifying all the plants, and the signage will be made by the students. That was another part of our plan. So it is an exciting thing.
And maybe Alex's soil people can get together with you guys.
Actually, Jared, it was at our last meeting, so he's linked into this too. Yeah.
Terrific.
Okay. So so we would like to get the fundraiser going if we know that this project is happening. So I guess that's what we're asking today, and I guess that's a town question, is whether we have your approval.
Well, I am so much in favor of all this. I just, it's absolutely wonderful and exciting. And of course, the generational aspect is so favorable. People getting involved and helping the environment is fantastic. So I'm certainly on board. So I don't know. I guess Neil is still here and Alex.
We're here. I don't think we have a quorum, but I'm not too worried about the town being supportive of this. We were all pretty unanimously in support of the compost bins. I think this builds on it. We've talked about, Liz and I have been talking about projects like this for a while. The real benefit is, in addition to pollinating habitat, it also reduces labor. So we save money by not having to mow.
That's right.
So, it's kind of a win-win for everyone. I think it looks nice. It gets people involved. I really don't see this being a problem. Chuck's on board. I think we just need to make sure that, people are safe when they do it. We don't want anyone getting electrocuted to put in pollinator gardens. So we need to make sure that the electrical lines are identified and that, we know how deep they are. We also want to make sure we don't impact the DPW with, not the DPW, the DMV. That's why that structure is there. I don't think we can put anything on our websites for the fundraising. I think people might think that we're not allowed to fundraise, right? As a municipality, people might take it as extortion.
Okay.
So we tend to stay away from that, but we could ask for specifics on that, but we don't normally ask for donations and stuff like that.
Okay, that part's okay then. We can certainly understand the sensitivity of that. Then maybe what we'll just ask is that we put a blurb out about what the project is, what's going to be happening, and then I'm sure that whatever we put as a press release in Hudson Valley 1 could include a link to the fundraiser, so that people would know, how to go to our GoFundMe. We could do that way. Okay, good point. All right.
And I imagine I know personally I would, if it's on Facebook, I would be happy to share it on my personal page. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who would do that as well.
Right. And of course, we always have next door New Paltz. It's another one. So. Okay.
One thing I was going to just say, I did mention at the town board meeting is if it's an open compost, I'm concerned about bringing animals out, for example, from the Millbrook Preserve to, possibly have interactions with humans or even, just change their behavior. That's the one thing I would want to caution the project members about. Just we want to make sure we know about the possibility that it'll change the behavior of animals, so they're seeking the food that humans are putting in. the open compost. So Amanda, I think you were there and you heard me suggest maybe a lid on the first one so that things can start to, degrade.
Right, we
before,
did,
before
we
they're
have,
taken out. I just know other places like the school behind my school, the school I've taught at before, they have an open compost and we've seen animals in it, like groundhog, yeah, groundhogs and
right. So we definitely have discussed that, and but I'm also seeing that we need to move along here, that you have a lot of other things on the agenda.
Absolutely,
So
yeah.
we'll circle back to you on that, but we have talked about that and we can continue that discussion with you, Julie. Thank you.
so much. Yep.
Okay, all right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Sounds like a great project.
Thank you so much.
Okay, what is next on this agenda?
The pandemic response plan.
The public employer health emergency plan for New Paltz. Ariana told me, Neil, that you have this totally under control and you're gonna.
Oh yeah, totally under control. So I think the town and village have sent it out to our, this is another executive order. We started sometime this summer, the town and village. I think the idea is that there's basically a pandemic response plan on how we respond to the next pandemic, since it needs to be general enough that it's not just COVID focused. It's how do you handle split shifts, time off, sick, things like that. Our hope was to have a plan that was kind of general enough that it fit more than just COVID, but it fit maybe the next pandemic that comes down the pike. But also that it was general enough that it was kind of uniform across the town and village. And I think it's general and flexible enough. I think Ariana did a really good job of pulling that all together and basing it on recommendations from CDC. I think the town and village have sent it out to all of our part of the executive orders. The unions have to sign off. We have sent it out to the town unions. I think the village has sent it out to theirs. We've gotten some responses back. We haven't heard back from all of the unions yet, so we can't really make a final decision on it. Most of the comments I think were pretty minor, wording changes. I'm not sure we can incorporate some of them. Some of them I think we can run it by, or maybe push back a little bit and say, well, your comments you may feel strongly about this, but this doesn't fit for everyone. So one of the comments was like, well, we don't want the employees, cleaning up if there is something that needs to be cleaned. And, my kind of response to that is, well, they've been doing it. People have been cleaning their own workspaces now for a year. We're not asking people to do outrageous amounts of cleaning, but, people have hand sanitizer or a spray bottle at their desk and they wipe it down. I don't think that's unrealistic. We're not going to bring in an outside cleaning company. We just don't have the money or the personnel to do that. And a lot of people feel more comfortable cleaning their own space. A lot of the town hall offices, back in June, they had notes on the door, I'll clean my own space. I don't want anyone else entering. So, I think some of those things we can kind of respond back to. I don't know how much we need to discuss it tonight. We're still waiting. So, Ariana?
Yeah, I included the response that we got from the CSEA union rep just at the top of the draft plan, which is linked in the agenda. And I think, what you said is true. I think everything that they requested they requested changes and we could include. None of it seems outrageous to me. One of them, they suggested some language, and it's like stuff that's like referencing OSHA regulations, like established PPE programs, trainings, things along these lines that of course we should reference that, and we could reference whatever is the most up-to-date version, the way we do with the village codes, that we don't have to update it ever. but so I think we can include that kind of stuff, but it does need to be, it's supposed to be adopted and in place by April 1st. So if we can wrap up our edits and get it on, I was hoping that we would be able to vote on it tonight, but if we haven't gotten all the responses yet, and haven't been able to incorporate them yet, then obviously we have to wait. So we could do it at the next village board meeting on the 24th, and you guys could do it at your next meeting for the town board as well.
I mean, the thing is, like, now that if we have four different unions responding, if we incorporate all of the changes, then do we have to then send it back to all the unions with the different responses from all the different unions, right? So that's the thing. Or do we, because even if we accept all of the changes, those changes weren't all approved by all the
unions, right? I don't know. I would have to look into what the proper protocol or procedure requirements are from the state in terms of that. Because I don't know if they even were requiring that the unions approve it entirely, or if they just wanted us to have enough time to get union feedback on it and then make a decision.
Yeah, I think you're right. So we can maybe look into that, and then we can incorporate suggestions, and then the boards can adopt it at the next meetings. That sounds good.
All right, cool. Then
Okay,
I think we can move on.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next agenda item. We have a resolution to support regarding Opportunity Zone Tax Break Elimination Act. So KT, I'm going to ask you to explain it in a second, but just for the sake of kind of moving this forward, can we just have this be a village resolution and vote on it tonight to move it along? And then if the town wants to do it, they can do their own thing. But maybe you can just give us a little background on what it is. But that's what I would like to do this evening, is just to move it along for the village.
I was gonna say that we've in the village have been having a lot of conversations about this, so none of this is really new information for us. It's not like a real first read in that sense. So I was hoping that we could pass it and just, hey, town, we strongly encourage you to do this too.
Well, they just don't have a quorum tonight. That's why I was saying it.
Right. So it's basically a resolution that ends up in two parts. With two asks. One is that our local Ulster County IDA, in the interest of being more transparent and accountable, disclose more precise dollar amounts and information about tax breaks that are awarded, and that it's been, just a lot more daylighting of this information, including the names of individual investors and things that need to be made public for this to be a more transparent process. And in tandem with that, there's a bill at the state level, the Opportunity Zone Tax Break Elimination Act, which would decouple New York's capital gains tax code from the Trump's 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which basically created these opportunity zones that really are just a way for wealthy investors to exploit the housing crisis. So that's at the state level. They want to push back and not allow this. These things called opportunity zones. There are 4 of them in Ulster County, and basically it's grift. So, or not grift, it's traditional grift, but it's definitely, they're just loopholes that were created so for-profit investors could, like I said, exploit the housing crisis. And we've been talking a lot about this in light of the Kingstonian. We still haven't been able to get a straight answer about whether opportunity zones apply here. While we know that it isn't an opportunity zone, it's a sort of amorphous thing because it is predictive. It's like Tim could explain it better than me, Mr. Finances, but it's all about capital gains and when you buy and sell things and profit off things, and the potential for profit is ginormous, to use a technical term. So that's it in a nutshell, if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, to me,
and we should thank Alana Ross, who helped us She's been unraveling a lot of this stuff. What's her website? Hudson Valley Vindicator.
Hudson Valley Vindicator.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
she was
she helped me.
an incredibly involved person,
Together.
looking very closely at the Kingstonian project and the Ulster County Industrial Development Agency. I think what's fascinating about our resolution here is it kind of blows my mind that IDAs don't automatically do this stuff. It's like they're willing to, give away tax abatements and not be hyper transparent about how or why they work and who benefits. It just seems really unfathomable to me. So I wholeheartedly support improvements like this. I feel like the jury is out on whether we should have IDAs at all, but if we're stuck with them because of state law, at a minimum, they have to be doing this.
Can I just add to that? I literally read so many state laws because I was like, there's got to be a this it has to be required already, to list all of that. So my mind was very blown, and has been blown every day, that there is no transparency in this end. So I'm excited about this resolution. Thanks, guys.
And all the good government groups, Reinvent Albany, there's 19 good government groups that support it, from, Albany groups like Citizen Action, and they're around here too, and Alliance for Quality Education, but also Nobody Leaves Manhudson and NYPIRG, and lots of unions. It's really, and it is crazy. It's like you look at this, you're like, I can't believe we have to ask for this. And you know what? We're gonna have to keep asking our county IDA to do it, because I'm not really feeling that just because we're gonna ask for it, we're gonna get it. But we're gonna ask.
Yeah, we want to be on record for being involved in the right side of the way things should be done. I think that's very important to us, so we can look ourselves in the mirror.
So I'd like to move this for the village.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks all.
Okay. So we have this draft resolution regarding the Shocon Reservoir. I would like to circle back on this. I would like to just have additional conversations with Riverkeeper and the DEC and the DEP. I had some preliminary conversations, but I would like to punt and revisit this in the future, if you guys are okay with that.
I am.
Yeah, I think something's going on there, but we still need to figure out exactly what's going on and what we want to say about it.
Yeah, it's climate change. So next item, you want to walk us through the New Paltz Youth Council idea, KT?
So, Neil, you want to do it, or you want me to start?
You can start. I'll just try not to interrupt you with.
That's fine.
Speaking.
So Neil and I this is just a kernel of idea that it happened Saturday morning on a phone call between Neil and I. We were talking about the opioid crisis. We were talking about kids, food insecurity. We were talking about, getting more kids outside. All these issues that are affecting youth in our community. And we started, I don't even know, I think Neil said it first, we need something like what we have for emergency preparedness for youth in our community. A regular ongoing network of all the people who in some way, shape, or form deal with youth in our community. So like the emergency preparedness work that we do, we have the relationships, we're regularly talking to each other. And then when something happens, we can jump a lot quicker. We also had the community partnership grant that ran out, that we can build on that. This is, like I said, just like a kernel of an idea. We just feel like there's a gap in our community in connecting some of the dots here in serving our youth. And I also think to a certain extent, there's been a lot of expectations of the school district that I feel like should be expectations of the community that we should all own together. And this would be a way of taking ownership in that way and having, a regular network. And I actually was talking to Jim Tinger about it earlier today. And, when he was hired, there was a youth commission that hired him and he reported to, and it was a different structure. And so like we've had these different networks to serve youth and make sure that, we're attending to youth and hearing from youth. And now we have a new superintendent and we have all these new principals and, then we had COVID and it just like, it feels like we just think there's something we can do. We don't want to add any work to what people are doing, but to add a structure of communication, regular communication. So there's a network, as I said, like what we do with emergency preparedness and other things. Did you bring those opioid stats with you, Neil? Because I also want to make sure we say that out loud. I'm committed to every single meeting citing what our at least our Ulster County stats are for opioid deaths, because this is a crisis and we need to pay a lot more attention to it.
At staff meeting today, and I apologize if I get the numbers wrong because
You're really, really low, or is that just me?
I took my mic out, but let me put it back in here. So, we talked about this in our staff meeting today, and I apologize if I get the numbers wrong because I think every.
Yeah, Neil, you're still low. If you can do something with your volume.
Is that better?
No.
I don't know. Geez, I was fine all night. Is that better? If I turn the video off? No?
No.
I mean, we can hear you. It's just very low.
Yeah.
That's better.
Yeah, lean in.
So, I mean, we talked about this at staff meeting today, and I may get the numbers wrong, but so, I think, maybe in 2019, if I'm remembering right, it was 20 deaths with opioids. I think last year it doubled to 40. I think we've already had 20 this year alone. And I apologize if I have the numbers wrong. I didn't write them down, but this is a crisis. And we have teams working on this, but KT and I were talking, and kind of the reason we were thinking about this is we were looking back on how where we were successful, right? And with the water crisis, I know it's a lifetime ago, but we were able to kind of come together very quickly and I think respond fairly well to that. And I think a lot of it was because we had this organization that was used to working together, and there was relationships there, but we don't really have that, or we need something like that. And I think that's the impetus for trying to pull something together, having a group, we all hate meetings, but, bringing a group together where, the people can sit around the table and things can happen very quickly, or decisions can be made that, I think would be good. If we think back to a year ago when we were worried about not having food for people in the community. And, KT took the lead with Teresa Fall and a few others, and they started, I think, the beginning of Project Resilience, but it was here in New Paltz. That took a lot of work. Something like that could have been solved by this organization because there would have been strong relationships between the town, the village, the school, the youth program. And I think there were a couple instances, over the last year with COVID when, with the camps and the daycares and outdoor activities where we were struggling to try to fill all these holes, but we didn't have everyone at the table. And so we're just wanted to bring this up to the group as, let's start talking about this idea and let's pull the people together that can, address some of these, I think where we're dropping the ball as a community. But that's just, I think that was a long talk before we both had, this was probably like, what, 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning when we were both talking, drinking our coffee. And
That's what happens when you email at 6 a.m.
it's like, oh, Neil's up too. Let's just talk. So,
But good ideas come of it. But yeah, like when Neil and I were trying to do the working parents helping and when the back to school transition, like I feel like even us, we were like pushing that information onto the schools. And I think we need to take a more holistic, like if we think about like the concept of community schools, not in the brick and mortar sense, but in the virtual sense, right? Like how do we create community schools together, connected, because it shouldn't just be on the schools. Obviously, the schools are a big part of the equation, but we as a community are responsible for feeding the children and aren't making sure that no kid goes to sleep hungry at night, which isn't happening because kids are hungry. I know that. And all the other things that came up in our surveys, whether it was technology or getting the kids outside or the mental health issues, which is correlated with the opioid crisis issues. And I just feel like there's a lot of energy. There's a lot of people in this community that could chip in and help and fill these gaps, but we need a structure. We need a space for the dots to get connected and things to happen. So Jim Tinger actually likes the idea of youth commission. So we can bang around whatever the name is. I have some notes on like who would be on it. And I sort of have this like idea that it could be like supported by working groups, like there'd be a food group and there'd be some, but so Neil and I will try to get this to like a 1-page or 2 draft before we meet again. But we're not like committed to any like way, shape or form that this should be. This is like, we're trying to figure it out. So, I 100% welcome.
I mean, the partnership was there and successful and kind of the idea, when we brought this up to Jim and Phoenix, they both brought up, well, we had this partnership for a long time and we're not trying to do away with that or, even, change it all that much, anything more than let's revitalize it. It's kind of, it was tied to the grant, but that doesn't mean it needs to end or not be brought back. And so, like KT said, all ideas are on the table, but we're putting it out to the board and we'll probably put it out to, Jim and Phoenix and, people that were part of it before and just like, hey, remember you did such great things before? Let's get them going again. That's kind of the idea behind this.
And the school district, we should probably let them know that we're noodling on this idea.
Yeah.
So we'll reach out to Superintendent Urbina Medina.
I'll just say that I think it's fantastic and very, very timely because of COVID. I think it's time to check in with families and find out, how our kids are doing and find how we can serve them better. And I bet there's, a lot of people who would like to come together and work on this issue, before kind of it's too late, as in before we, think everything's fine and then it's not. So as far as, you can count on me for sure in the getting kids outside area.
Good stuff. All right, so we should move on to the next agenda item here. We have the baseball softball parade. So is there a way that we could approve the parade, but then encourage the association not to do the gathering get together that they historically do in the park? Like